Hey guys, I'm officially back and here to stay for quite some time. I'm so sorry I was gone for even longer now. Just a bunch of personal stuff going on, a lot of changes to my life, yada yada, and no one cares. You guys aren't here to listen to my story about why I was gone. What you are here for is welcome back to another episode of Lil Man asks random questions and then tries to answer them. I've been on a recent spree of shower thought ideas since I've been gone that I thought would make a good video, and could actually be pretty entertaining too. Maybe not all too useful, and we are starting off pretty tame with this one that could actually be useful to some, but we like to have fun here on my channel. We don't take anything super seriously. I mean, it's DVD. This is the same game that has Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria with an elephant clown chasing down Nicolas Cage while Quentin Smith lingers in the background. But today, I asked myself, what is the best teachable perk for each survivor? And while there won't necessarily be a criteria we are going to look for, I feel like there are some things that need to be accounted for, and I have to choose only one perk for each survivor. And there are some survivors that have no good perks, and some survivors that have all good or decent perks. And if you disagree with something I say, I would love to know your opinion down below. Without any further ado, let's get right into looking into each survivor to really see which teachable is their best. And for this, we are starting from the top of the roster and going in order. And yes, I am including Rick and Michonne from the PTB. While I was not able to play the PTB, I still have their perks and I read through it all. But yes, I will be including that too. So of course, we will start with Dwight, who does have really good perks all around. And while Leader I think is probably the worst out of the bunch, it's a fight between Prove Thyself and Bond. Prove Thyself is amazing for doing gens with other people. And while this definitely helps in the early game especially, doing gens separately is mainly what you'll be doing unless you stealth and follow this one person the whole game. I believe that Bond is the best perk here, just because it gives you so much information without having to be on comms with everybody in your lobby. Unless that's the only way that you play the game, which fair enough. I'm sure we've all had at least one experience where someone, or even you, have been left on hook because survivors weren't aware of their teammates' positions, and this definitely helps with that a bunch. Although you can definitely argue that since the HUD changes have been implemented where you can see what other people are doing, it may have nerfed this perk a little bit, and while some of that is true, it's always nice to see what your teammates are really up to, like possibly setting yourself up for a flashlight save, or even watching your Meg main teammate urban evade on the edge of the map. Overall, I think it just helps a bunch during the game. Speaking of Meg, unlike the Meg main stereotype, all of Meg's perks are actually really helpful in some way, and they all have their own uses of when they could absolutely clutch up a game. But something we can't deny is that Sprint Burst is Meg's best perk by far, and definitely the best exhaustion perk. It's very simple to use and is super effective to get away from killers, and it's also incredibly versatile. You can walk mid-chase and try to get it back, you can set up for a flashlight save or a pallet save, you can get that last second save on your teammate too. It can be used in so many helpful ways, although I guess it can be dangerous too. Just because it can sometimes limit your running, doesn't mean that you have to walk everywhere 24/7. 40 seconds in this game really isn't too long, and your cooldown will most likely go down while you were doing a gen anyways. If the killer has Mindbreaker though, then it's just over for you at that point. Claudette is an interesting character where all of her perks are more of a support role. You can see injured people with empathy, and you can heal yourself, and that would definitely be the best perk if it didn't take around 45 seconds to get the heal off. So I think for that reason, I just have to go with Botany Knowledge. And what makes this so good, especially now, is that I got a recent buff where, from my knowledge, they took out the downside of this perk, allowing you to use it even with medkits now. Being able to heal your teammates and reset even a little bit faster really helps in the long game, but to do it much faster is super nice. And now you can run self-care with it too, so it doesn't take 5 years to heal yourself. It's all around a good perk to have, definitely a quality of life one. Jake, I think we all know hands down that his best perk is Iron Will. Now, even though the perk did get nerfed pretty heavily, it still allows you to possibly juke killers behind obstacles, but watch out since your footsteps are still pretty heavy. Now the downside of this perk in general is that exhaustion perks don't really become too useful to you, since you'll be hindering yourself with cancelling out this perk. But for most situations that won't be all too bad. Jake's other two perks aren't really too helpful unless you want to run a specific build with Saboteur, or just hate the screaming with Calm Spirit. Iron Will is definitely the best. Nea is a tricky one because she doesn't have a bad perk, but most of them are just super situational. You can counter certain killers with Urban Evasion, you can really max out the efficiency of your toolbox or flashlight with Streetwise, but I think her best one is Balanced Landing. Most of the time killers won't really expect you to have this, and you'll jump off something and then speed away which actually sometimes works in your favor, since if the killer isn't a ghoul, then they won't be able to catch up to you very fast. And hey, sometimes they might even go somewhere else because you zoomed away. There isn't very much high drops on every map though, so you have to use spots like the basement stairs or little areas where you can get just enough height to proc the perk, which definitely can be annoying for sure. Laurie probably has the longest descriptions on her perks in the game, but something I think we can all agree on is that her best perk is definitely Decisive Strike. This can really put a stop to a killer's win in the game if done correctly. The extra time you get with this perk is super beneficial. Even if you only last about 10 seconds afterwards anyways, the team is able to get more gens done in the meantime. Now, this perk really did take a big hit when it came to conspicuous actions, but it's not all too bad, since if you really are only getting tunneled, it won't be too bad in the long run anyways, because you're not going to be able to have the time to do gens and stuff like that. Soul Survivor won't come in too much play, since a lot of the time it'll never even work. An Object of Obsession, while definitely being useful, isn't the best for all players, and can really mess you up. So I think Decisive Strike is ultimately the better one. Ace unfortunately doesn't have good perks at all, and over the years have definitely gone down in quality, I think. Like Up the Ante never being changed in the history of the game, and Ace in the Hole being last touched in 3.6.0, and Open Handed, which was also last touched in 4.7.0, which was more than 4 years ago. And speaking of Open Handed, I think that has to be his best perk here. While it doesn't come in handy all too much, the fact that this perk's effect works with all of your teammates make this perk actually worth it, since you can run this thing with like Windows or Kindred to really squeeze out all the effects of these perks. It's actually not too bad of a perk, but maybe just not one that you want to run by itself. Builds perks like Ace have gone down in quality over the years, I think. But there is one perk that has stood the test of time for sure, and this perk is Unbreakable, where you can pick yourself back up from the dying state once. It's super simple and super effective. Left Behind isn't too good, and Borrowed Time, while being a necessary back in the day, has become base kit now. And not a lot of killers will breathe down your neck waiting for the exact moment that endurance and haste goes away when unhooked, so it won't really be too useful. Unbreakable, however, while definitely being situational, will clutch up games for you when you think you've lost all hope. Feng has some of the best perks in the game, and they are all depend on what skill level you really are. I think as you get better, you won't have to run Technician anymore, although we all miss skill checks every once in a while. So I think it's a fight between Lithe and Alert, and for me personally, it was a tough choice, but I think Lithe comes out on top. While Alert is one of the best perks to run for information on the killer, since it's more of a passive ability, I think Lithe is better just because of the ability to get out of dead zones so easily, and the ability to run from a pretty unsafe loop to a safer one so fast. It can really help you a lot of the time, but let me know what you guys all think. It also comes in really handy when you get hit at the window that you just vaulted and you just speed away at max speed. It's so fun. David has one of the best meme perks in the game, but unfortunately it's kind of detrimental nowadays, since being injured all the time with no mither is really not that good, unless you put yourself in a safe spot every time, and are good at looping the killer or just staying way away, which both can be really hard to grasp. And because of how situational We're Gonna Live Forever is, I think I have to go with Dead Hard as the best one here. It's not bad at all, but it's just very janky, and sometimes you press the button but just teleport on the ground because of latency issues, which can really be annoying sometimes. Although when it works, just like Decisive Strike, this ruins the killer's pressure completely, and can cost them the game in some scenarios. It's not a bad perk, but just can be really hard to use sometimes. Quentin, I think hands down, his best perk is Vigil, just because of everything that gets reduced. Basically every status effect in the game gets cut down so much. His other two perks can definitely come into use, but Vigil I think stomps over all of them, just because of how often you and your team can actually use this effect. One of the best perks being used recently has been Exposed perks, and this negates those a lot of the time. It also helps when you run Dramaturgy or Dramaturgy and accidentally get exposed. While the other two perks are handy sometimes, this perk comes out on top 100%. Tapp is an interesting case here. All of his perks are just kind of okay. There's not one that is superior over the other, but I think I'll have to go with Detective's Hunch as his best, just because of all the information you get can possibly help you stop a 3-gen situation, or find a hex totem if you're on a map where it can be hard to spot totems. Tenacity can actually really help you get away when it's a slugging team, and can mess with the killer, while Stakeout can be really good when you pair it with other perks we'll get to later, and just in general when you can't quite hit those grayscale checks. None of these perks are the best, but they can definitely help you out when you need it. Kate by far is Windows Opportunity. And I think we can all agree on that one. Being able to see where you need to go and chase really helps you not run yourself into a dead zone. With this perk, it's very easy to understand where pallets and windows spawn in certain maps with certain tiles, since most of the time main buildings specifically don't typically change all too much. Maybe just a pallet gone or an extra one spawns in where you didn't know it was before, but with windows you'll be able to see where to go and where not to specifically. And while Boil Over and Dance With Me aren't bad, I don't think they even come close to the potential that Windows has on most players, with it being literally #1 most picked perk for years. All of Adam's perks are actually pretty fun to play with, in my opinion at least, and can all be useful in their own way, if used correctly though. But I think the best one that he has definitely has to be Deliverance, just because of how it can really turn a game in the survivor's favor very quickly. A survivor not having to come save you really helps the other survivors focus on the gens, but of course that's the ideal scenario. What'll most likely happen is one of two things. You'll either be found first, completely negating this perk's effect, or you won't be able to get a save for the life of you, also completely negating this perk's effect. Diversion is also just hard to actually get value from, but it's still fun to just toss a pebble anyways. And Autodidact is one of my favorite perks and can be useful, but skill checks are just so random, and that first skill check will most likely come at the most inconvenient time possible. So I think it has to be Deliverance for sure. Jeff has a lot of interesting perks, and I would say Distortion is his best, and while it is still really good, the heavy nerf that they applied kind of makes it not as good as I hoped. At least from my experience, so definitely let me know. I believe that Aftercare is his best, just because aura reading is really nice. It's like Bond, and although it has a higher requirement, at some point in the game, you are bound to get it at least on one person. And the fact that it's infinite range is very nice, so you can actually see your teammates get into lockers across the map. While Breakdown is nice, I've tried to use it so many times and it just doesn't work out, or is just not as useful as it seems, since nowadays it seems like hooks are just so close together. I don't know about me. And also it doesn't help that in this anniversary event there's literally remote hooking. Jane has a bunch of unique perks, and if I'm honest, I've tried to get Solidarity to work for me, but it just never works out. And I really wanted to put Head On as the best here, but ultimately I had to admit to myself that not all meme perks are worthy of being the best perks, and with Head On being very situational, it just makes it a little hard to make it work to its fullest. But I do think that with the recent buff they did with Poised, that has to be the best out of the bunch here, just because of how consistent it actually is. It's a pretty decent aura reading perk, and while the scratch marks not being left is a very minute detail, I don't think it's actually that bad. So I think this has to be one of the best that Jane has to offer. Ash, on the other hand, is a character that has very weird perks that throughout the history of DVD have either been literally the best or literally the worst perks ever. But I will say that each one of these perks have been in some sort of meta build at one point in DVD's history. So it's a little bit hard to judge, but because we aren't talking about the history of DVD's perks and just the current state, I think I'm gonna have to go with Flip Flop for the best. While it's not really that useful and definitely won't get use all the time, it can still help you get off the killer's shoulder, especially when paired with other perks like Power Struggle or Unbreakable. The other two perks are just kind of bland now. Buckle Up isn't too bad, but Medal of Man just takes too long to activate and just seems unnecessary in some scenarios, unless you are going against a Survive with Friends that will bully you to no end. Nancy I personally think is a very beginner friendly survivor, so it was a little difficult for me to choose really which one I thought was better, but I ultimately went with Fixated just because of its usefulness that you can get with it with any playstyle. You want to play stealthy? Then boom, there you go. You want to play aggressive? Boom, walk your exhaustion off mid-chase. You want to walk your gas can to the blood gen even though that event is already over? Boom, run Fixated. It's all around a really good perk I think, and I run it all the time in my builds. The other two perks are nice, but if I'm honest, there are too many perks that make gens yellow for Better Together to be of any use anymore, and I do think that Inner Strength isn't as good now as it used to be, but it's still a good perk nonetheless. Steve has a lot of unique perks, but the one I think that stands out the most is Babysitter. Out of his whole kit, I think this perk allows you to get some serious value without having to do all too much. Giving the survivor more speed to get away, and for you to be able to see the killer is a really good combination to have in one perk. Because if the killer is coming back, you can point it out to the survivor, and they can run early and get a bunch of distance. In my opinion, Second Wind isn't actually that good of an effect as I hope it would be sometimes, and Camaraderie is just too situational to come into play like at all. At least for me. Yui perks are very situational in my opinion, but that doesn't mean they are bad in the slightest. Lucky Break isn't too terrible for certain builds, and the fact you can get it back somehow is good, but I don't think it's all too amazing. And Breakout is wonderfully fun to try, but most of the time, I'm not gonna lie, it really doesn't help all too much unless you're playing with friends. So I think that Any Means Necessary is her best perk, just because of how much value this ultimately gives you. And I'm not sure if it's been in my games recently, but almost no killer is actually breaking any pallets. And the fact this perk has no cooldown is great when you get a game like that. Zarina, I think we all know that her best perk is just off the record, hands down. It's been consistently the best anti-tunneling perk in the game for a long time. And I love how even if you do a conspicuous action, you still get the no grunts of pains for that duration, which is super nice to have. I've tried to use Red Herring so many times. It seems like a really good and fun perk to have on paper, but then you use it and you realize just how hard it actually is to get value from, or to even use in the first place. And For the People is a very fun perk to use, but it does hinder the user for a while, which can get really messy sometimes. So that's why I just say that Off the Record is by far her best. Cheryl has probably some of the most bland or just quote unquote why bother perks in the game. Blood Pact, I'm sorry, but for what it's trying to do, I just can't get any value from it. Sticking together really isn't a good thing all the time in most games, and while yes, the speed is nice, you most likely won't get it for very long. Repressed Alliance is one of those why bother perks, just because it's so weird to use, since you can never really tell if it's ending up working for you or not. Or sometimes you just block the gen that you didn't even need to in the first place, and now you're just sitting there waiting for your own timer to go down like a fool. So I really only think that Soul Guard is the best one here, because it's one of the only perks that you can actually get some use out of. Most of the time this perk is used when I survive with friends, and normally with Boon Exponential and in the basement of the elementary school. But by itself, it can be pretty useful to have, but this is probably one of the most situational perks in the game, just because the killer needs to slug and you have to be cursed by a hex, which doesn't always happen, but all of her perks are just very situational anyways. Felix has a lot of very simple perks, so this won't be a very long, thankfully. Visionary is very good for beginners, being able to see exactly where gens are, and Desperate Measures is just a good perk to have if you need a filler perk, since you'll be getting use out of it the whole game, and while 14% isn't too much, if everyone is injured, it really helps. But I think that Built to Last is the best here, just because you can bring your strongest item back, like a strong toolbox or a strong flashlight to harass the killer, and you can get it back so many different times too. Insane. This perk is definitely the best out of these couple. Elodie has a lot of perks that you think would be really good, but in game, they just aren't very useful. Like Appraisal, for example, needs a very specific chest build to even get some good stuff from it, unless you want poo-poo medkits and toolboxes all the time. And Power Struggle is such a pain to even try to use nowadays, and it can definitely be used, but killers are now more aware of it, so it's kind of hard to get value from it. So that's why I think Deception is Elodie's best perk. It's not ideal, but you can still definitely mess with the killer pretty heavily, but unfortunately it's a perk that when you use it once, you probably won't be able to use it again, since the killer will know that you have the perk. The no scratch marks can allow you to make some pretty good plays too. Yun-Jin has a bunch of perks that are very strange and very mediocre. Fast Track is good on paper, but sometimes you just have so much pressure on you that you aren't ever able to actually use it to its fullest. And Self-Preservation, while not being bad, is just kind of a whatever perk. It most of the time won't help you much anyways, so there isn't too much of a point to run it. So that's why I think that Smash Hit is the best here, and I know Smash Hit really isn't that good in the first place, since it's very hard to get stuns on the killer sometimes, but you feel like you are in heaven when you get that hit and you just run at full speed to the next loop. It's good when you put it like that, although I do know it's very hard to actually use in-game. Jill unironically has a lot of good perks in her kit, that it's hard to just choose one, but I think I have to go for Resurgence as her best, just because of how fast you can reset under the hook. It's so incredibly useful. You save so much time, it's crazy. And even if the killer has some sort of hemorrhage, you still save a bunch of time. Blast Mine is such a meme, and I swear since this perk's existence, I'm always so hesitant to kick gens now, since I feel like I'm always going to get Blast Mined every time. It's honestly kind of funny, I'm not going to lie. And Counterforce is just kind of there. It's good when you need it for Hex Totems, but that's about it. Gets its job done, but I think Resurgence is just the best because you reset so fast. Leon is a tricky one to pick because his perks aren't amazing or anything and all come in handy in certain situations, but I think the one that will ultimately be the best is Flashbang. It's a bit of a meme, but being able to throw it down when the killer is breaking a pallet or getting a flashbang save or even just throwing it around a corner so the killer turns and then gets jump scared. You can use it in so many different ways that I personally think it's the best. His other 2 perks aren't terrible. Bite the Bullet is really useful, especially in indoor maps, and can pair really nicely with a medkit to escape the killer possibly. And Rookie Spirit is nice to know where the killer is, or if you just need to see where you need to go next. All good perks for sure, but Flashbang is the one that you can use consistently the most. Mikaela was the first to bring our lovely boon totems that nowadays aren't too helpful in the long run, but I do think that her best perk is actually Shadow Step. This is like one of the only boon totems that I think is actually very consistent in what it does. It hides your scratch marks and hides your auras within the boon radius. It's that simple, and yet it's so effective now, and has got me confused so many times when playing killers sometimes. Circle of Healing isn't really that good anymore, although it is good to have just sometimes, and Clairvoyance just feels clunky to use just because you have to have nothing in your hand and cleanse a totem, which just feels weird with the rest of her kit. If you want to run a boon, then I highly suggest Shadow Step for sure. Jonah's perks are just kinda meh. Boon Exponential is just unbreakable, but in the boon, which can be good, but it sucks because it's on a boon. And sometimes you just can't find that totem, or the killer comes across your boon 24/7, and you'll never actually get value for it. Corrective Action used to be one of the worst perks in the game, but now it's not too terrible. Being able to negate missed skill checks is always a good thing, but it just comes with the fact that most of the time survivors won't miss skill checks all too much. It'll never really see use, and because it's a passive, you won't ever think it's working until you see the token counter go down. So for those reasons, I think Overcome is probably the best perk that he has here, just because of how much use you can get from it. Being able to speed away and give you that distance is unbelievably useful, especially against killers that can easily catch up to you that normally you feel like you wouldn't have much of a chance, like Ghoul or Blight. It makes it easier to run away from them when you run Overcome. Yoichi, just like Jonah, just has kinda meh perks. Nothing too special, but they aren't terrible either. Boon Dark Theory can maybe help a little bit in loops. Because of the small haste, it doesn't really do too much, unless it's endgame and you run Hope with it too. And while Parental Guidance is good, 7 seconds just isn't that much to get much value from it, which is why I say that Empathetic Connection is probably the best one here, and even though it's a passive, it can do a lot for you. Injured people see where you are, and teammates will understand 2 things. 1, you're most likely the healer of the group, or 2, don't run in that direction, especially if it looks like you are on a gen. Now, of course, that won't always be the case, but in most cases, it's inevitable that someone will be injured in your game, allowing some sort of aura reading in the first place, which I feel is crucial to know, especially when you are playing in solo queue. Haddie honestly has some pretty terrible perks to her name, unfortunately. Residual Manifest is really only good when you know how to use a flashlight, and even then, blindness for 30 seconds really doesn't do that much when you're playing killer, especially if they have some sort of game sense. And Overzealous just is not worth it your time at all, especially with the huge downside of losing it when you get hit too. So that's why I think Inner Focus is the better one, and honestly it's not too bad. Seeing other survivors' scratch marks can be a little confusing at first, but you can track down your injured teammates pretty easily with this. The aura reading too is very nice, because sometimes you are looking frantically around yourself not knowing where the killer is, and you'll be able to see them for quite some time here too. Ada also has some pretty terrible perks, and she only has one that I ever see used, which is Wiretap, which I think is the best one out of her kit. It's not all too good, but aura reading on the killer in general is always nice to have, and the fact from my knowledge this works through floors, so if you have a Wiretap on the 2nd floor and the killer's on the 1st floor right beneath it, you'll still be able to see them. And I don't know if it's just me, but killers these days don't seem to kick gens as much anymore, probably because they have perks like Pain Res and Surge to do it for them. I think I've gotten use out of low profile one time ever, and it still didn't really help me all too much. And Reactive Healing is just a weird perk, and if the killer has some sort of hemorrhage, then this effect just isn't worth your time. So Wiretap is definitely the better one here. Rebecca has 2 perks that are definitely tied with being the best one, and it's certainly not better than New, I'm sorry. It's a good quality of life thing to have, but not worth a perk slot if I'm honest. Hyperfocus is good too, but I think it's just too easy to miss the skill checks, and with how fast gens go by now, I'm not sure if this perk is even really needed at this point in time. It definitely helps though, and if you aren't too good at skill checks, then I don't think this perk is for you, which is why I'm gonna go with Reassurance as the best one here, just because of the amount of time you can get from it is insane. I believe the timer to get into this next stage of being hooked is changed to 70 seconds now, I think. So using this allows you to bring that up to 100, which is an insane amount of time for your team to reset and come for the save, especially since this works in the endgame. It's super nice to have, but if you are the one hooked, then it ultimately does nothing. Vittorio came with a bunch of very unique perks, and recently Quick Gambit has been changed to be better than it was, but it's still not his best. It's a good perk to have if you know how to loop, but eventually you'll get hit. Potential Energy can save you in some circumstances, but that's just it. It's only in some circumstances where a heavy 3-gen is placed, and even then it probably won't help you either. So that's why I think Fogwise is the best, just because if you were good at hitting skill checks, then it won't be a problem to have consistent aura reading on the killer. Even though skill checks are all completely up to RNG to happen, it's still a good chance to see where exactly the killer is, and 6 seconds is nothing to sleep on in this game. Thalita is our last survivor of the roster that has completely terrible perks, and not a single one of them are of basically any use at all, other than friendly competition, which I had to put at the top for perks just because it can actually be useful when paired with things like Prove Thyself. But most of the time, the ideal situation is again to split pressure on the gens, and do them completely separately, so the point of this perk just won't get used all too much. Her teamwork perk is garbage, I'll tell you that, and Cut Loose, it's not going to help you too much unless you are the master of stealth afterwards. So that's why I just think friendly competition is her best one for sure. Renato was kind of like Thalita, but his perks are actually worth running, except his teamwork perk is actually worse than hers, but Blood Rush I've seen firsthand actually get some use, but it just feels so risky to actually try and use in the first place. And if it doesn't work out for you, you just straight up die. But with Background Player on the other hand, can really be useful. Now I will admit that most of the time when someone is getting picked up, you'll most likely be on a gen, but the fact this perk lasts for so long and you can sprint for so long can really allow you to make it so far across the map that it's not even funny. And if you were good at flashlight saves, then this easily lets you line one up. And you can use this perk in so many ways that it just has to be the best for sure. Gabriel has very mediocre perks that aren't too good, but they aren't like bad. Unless we're talking about Scavenger, because that perk will never be worth her time. The reduction in gen speed progress is such a big thing in this game, just to get your toolbox back when you can run build to last and do the same thing. And while Made for This is good against Legion and Ghoul, there isn't really much else it's used for. The secondary ability is nice with the endurance effect, but it won't come into play all too much, unless you are playing with friends maybe. So that's why Troubleshooter I think is better teachable, just because of how much info it can actually give you. Being able to see the gen and know exactly where you probably shouldn't run is great, as well as that aura reading lasts a long time afterwards, and being able to see the killer when you drop a pallet really helps you in chase, especially if the killer tries to mind game you. Nicholas has the most fun perks in the game by far, and each one has their own use. Dramaturgy or Dramaturgy is probably the perk that can be used the most and get the most value from. It was also meta for a while and still kind of is too, although I've been exposed in front of the killer way too many times to count for my liking. Anyways, this perk can grant you so many different things like extra speed or even an OP item too. I've gotten so many brand new parts from Dramaturgy, it's insane. And his other perks aren't bad too. You'll mainly see Scene Partner on Steve's, but even that aura reading is really nice, especially if you get a chain scream. And you can get a lot of value from Plot Twist, and you can have some good laughs too if you use it in the killer's face. All just meme perks, and if I could, I would choose all of them as the best, but ultimately I think Dramaturgy is probably the better one. For Ellen, I'm going to choose Light-Footed for her best, just because I feel like this can really allow you to get away from killers sometimes. It also feels good to not have any loud footsteps, but also kind of uncanny to not hear any in the first place. But you can also get some easy flashlight saves with this, since the killer won't be able to hear you approaching as easily. It was this or Lucky Star as the best, just because Lucky Star you can use a bunch of the time, and is actually really helpful, because being able to be completely quiet and see where the gen is and see your teammates is really good. But for me personally, I think Light-Footed is better, just because I need to play with Lucky Star more myself first to really see, and Chemical Trap is more of just a fun meme perk. It's not really strong or anything, and it's super easy to get, but kind of hard to actually use since most of the time the killers won't break the pallet at all, so that's why I chose Light-Footed at least. Ellen has a bunch of perks that I don't really think will help you all too much. Champion of Light is funny to use, but the slowdown really doesn't matter at all, especially since most of the survivors that I go against when I'm playing killer will blind me at like the beginning of my animation, so by the time I get my vision back, the hindrance is already gone, so it doesn't really matter all too much. And while Deadline can be useful, it's like playing against a doctor, which isn't really too fun to begin with, and can be really difficult sometimes. So that's why I chose Illumination, just because it really does give you a bunch of value when within that boon, so you can know which gens to do to not 3-gen yourself, which is always a good thing to have. But it is a boon which can be easily snuffed. But I don't know, Alan's perks are pretty underwhelming if I'm honest. Sable was a tough choice because unlike Alan, all of her perks are used in ways that give you so much value from them, and even though Invocation isn't that good, it can still give you a bunch of value with the gens if your team is good at doing them in the first place. But I think I have to go with Wicked as her best just because 20 seconds of aura reading is really nice. And you can use that in so many different ways, like seeing if the killer is coming back, so you can actually be able to run in time, and things like that. Plus, if you get hooked in the basement, you can just completely get out of it immediately, which is super helpful to the team, since that's the worst place to be. And Strength in Shadows is good, because you can heal yourself pretty quickly, and that aura reading once again is nice. Being able to not need any help in the basement really helps you out a bunch. Aestri and Baymar have incredibly unique perks, but unfortunately none of them are really that good. Still Sight takes way too long to be of any use at all, and I know if they decrease the time to use his perk, it will just be way too overpowered at that point. So unfortunately, I think it'll just have to stay like this until they buff it or change it somehow. And while Mirrored Illusion is funny, that's basically all it has going for it. It works once or twice, and that's really it. It's a fun mind game to pull on the killer though, I will say. But I think that just means that I have to go with Bardic Inspiration, which is a good perk, but it just takes too long to get the effect out of it, which is fair since you are getting a pretty hefty increase to your skill check bonus, so it's completely understandable why, but it is up to luck in the first place anyways, so it can be really rough to use. Laura, I think we all know that her best is Finesse. This perk is just consistently really good for anyone. It doesn't really work as efficiently with some killers, but it can still really give you a bunch of value, and it can allow you to dodge a hit sometimes too. It won't work all the time, but it's better than her other perks, which are just okay. Hardened is good for playing against someone like a Clown or Doctor, but nothing else really. And Specialist is just more of an advanced and complicated way to run a brand new part, so it's not really that good in the long run either. But Finesse is definitely good because it seems to be meta right now, or at least from my experience. Trevor has perks that by itself don't work like at all. I need another perk or an item to work really efficiently. So that's why it's hard to choose exactly which one is better than the rest, but I think the one that is used more consistently than the others would be Moment of Glory, since you can make this perk definitely work in your favor if you are good at looping. And sometimes you don't need to be good at looping, because sometimes killers may hit you and then just leave you be. I think it's a good perk to use if you are confident in your abilities, and Exaltation is great if you are running something like a flashlight or a brown toolbox, but stuns are a little hard to come across sometimes. And while Isa Belmont is the lethal pursuer for survivors, I think it's not all too useful, since perks that show auras normally are fine as they are and don't really need an increase, but that's just me, and I know you can use this perk with a lot of fun builds. Tori, I think we all know her best is Shoulder the Burden, since the value you get from this perk completely negates a killer's pressure. And since normally how to win as a killer in this game is to tunnel one person out, this perk really helps the survivors out a bunch. Now of course it has downsides, like if you aren't able to go for the save, then this perk does nothing. And most of the time this perk will turn around on you and you'll be the one getting tunneled now. But if you know how to use it and are going to use it with friends specifically, this perk will be amazing for you. Clean Break is good too for the situations where healing at that exact second would hurt the team normally, but these instances are kind of rare in my opinion. And her Invocation has got to be probably the worst perk in the game by far, because it's completely useless. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, because I can be here for another like 5 minutes talking about how garbage this perk is, but it's just not that good. So definitely Shoulder the Burden is the best one out of her bunch. Aurela brought a whole bunch of healing and team perks with her that are actually pretty good, but I think the best one out of the bunch here is going to be Duty of Care, just because of how much it gives you. Protection hits can be necessary if one of your teammates is getting tunneled, and this really helps them get a bunch of distance to delay that crucial down for the killer. Her other perks are okay, but don't work as well as Duty of Care can. Like, Do No Harm is good, but it gets better the longer the trial goes on, and most of the time you won't be able to use it, since when they are dead on hook, the killer will most likely not leave them. The extra healing no matter what though is always nice. And Rapid Response I haven't quite found a good build for, but I think it's better with perks like Lithe or Dramaturgy to really get the fullest value from the perk. But definitely Duty of Care can be deadly, especially when you are going against a good survive with friends too. Rick and Michonne were only in the PTB, and like I said before, I unfortunately was not able to play it, and I think they'll be released in like 2 weeks time, I think, when I'm making this video at least. But from what I read, it seems to me like the best perk from Rick will definitely be Come and Get Me, just because of how much it does for the team. Now, the range that this perk has won't make it all too useful, but if you need to hide, let's say, a dead on hook teammate, then this is definitely the way to do it. I also can see either one of the other two being really good too. Like Apocalyptic Ingenuity would be great, but it's hard to use palettes that break immediately to their fullest potential, as we can see from the anniversary that's going on right now. And his Teamwork perk, unlike Thalita and Renato, is actually useful because it hides everything and doesn't require to be healed or heal someone else. It's just some other player just playing the game basically. So I can see any of them being useful. But for both Rick and Michonne, these perks may be subject to change, which is why they have a purple box around them, so maybe something will change, but I definitely think Come and Get Me is his best. Speaking of Michonne, our last survivor on our roster for now, and from reading her perks, it seems like the best one she has as of right now would be Conviction, which is definitely one of the more unique perks in the game by far, and could stir up some problems for sure. I also can see some funny moments with this, like someone getting up and then coming to you to where you are, like doing a gen or something, and then all of a sudden they're just on the ground. But I think you'll be able to use this perk very tactically. You can reposition yourself to confuse the killer, or save someone else with this timer you get. I think it's really good, and the plays that will be made will be super intense, I think. Last Stand is an absolute meme, and I can't wait to play with this. Since it's fair it's only one time, but vaulting into the killer to stun them is incredibly funny, I think. It's just like when Jane was released and so many people would just run head on. This is definitely just going to be the next head on. And her Teamwork perks look okay. When you blind or stun the killer, the timer for this perk goes, but the killer has to go through some sort of animation or blindness in the first place, which probably won't allow them to catch up anyways to that survivor that you just gave endurance to, but I guess we'll just see how it goes. Anyways though, that was what I personally think are the best teachable perks for each survivor in this game. This was supposed to be on the shorter side, but after looking at this with this voiceover right now, I don't think that's how it'll turn out. But nonetheless, I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'm sorry I took such a long break. I was gonna have so many videos scheduled for you guys, and then I just got burnt out, and honestly, I got pretty lazy. And a lot of personal stuff that happened. But for now, I'm gonna be making videos I think would be fun. Like I said at the beginning, more shower thought ideas that come to my mind a bunch recently. And of course, I'll be making those rankings and tier list videos coming, since you guys seem to love those. But no matter what, if you like this video, then I hope you consider subscribing. It means a bunch to me. Anyways guys, I'll see all of you in the next video, and I hope you all have a great and wonderful rest of your day or night. And take care everybody.